What is the truth behind the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Is Russia committing genocide in Ukraine? What was Putin's primary goal and how did it change? What is Putin's problem with NATO? What is the future of Russia considering the conflict with Ukraine? All your answers are waiting, and let's get started. Hey folks, welcome back to Studying Scholar. In this video, we are going to find out the truth about Putin's war, and let us dive in. Vladimir Putin started the biggest war in Europe since World War II. He did this because he thought that modern pro-Western Ukraine was a constant threat, and that Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist without it. Since then, thousands of people have died, cities like Mariupol are in ruins, and 13 million people have been forced to move. But the questions still remain, why did all of this happen and how will it end? What was Putin's initial goal? The Russian leader's first goal was to take over Ukraine and get rid of its government, making it impossible for Ukraine to join NATO. After failing for a month to take the capital Kyiv, he gave up and turned his attention to the east and south of Ukraine. When he started the invasion on February 24, he told the people of Russia that his goal was to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. He said that his goal was to help people who had been mistreated and killed by the Ukrainian government for 8 years. Keeping Ukraine's neutrality was soon added as a second goal. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, talked about freeing Ukraine from oppression. Sergei Narishkin, the head of foreign intelligence, said that Russia's fate and its future position in the world are at stake. Volodymyr Zelensky, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, said, "The enemy has made me their number one target. My family is their number two target." His advisor said that Russian troops tried to take over the president's home twice. The leader of Russia would not say that it was an invasion or a war. Moscow keeps calling the largest war in Europe since 1945 a special military operation. Claims in Ukraine about Nazis and genocide are completely false, but they are part of a story that Russia has been telling for years. It's crazy, and sometimes they can't even explain what they mean, according to Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine. But an opinion piece from the state-run media outlet RIA Novosti made it clear that denazification is unavoidably also de-Ukrainization, which means that the modern state would be erased. And now it is Russia that is being accused of war crimes by the rest of the world. Some countries, like the US and Canada, even call it genocide. Russian President Vladimir Putin said in reply that it is not our aim to conquer Ukrainian territory. We do not seek to impose anything on anyone by force. What has changed about Putin's goals? After a month of the invasion, Russia pulled back from Kyiv and said that its main goal was the liberation of Donbass, which is a broad term for the areas of Luhansk and Donetsk in the east of Ukraine. In a war that started in 2014, Russia's proxies had already taken over more than a third of this area. Now Russia wanted to take over all of it. The Kremlin said that it had generally achieved the goals of the first phase of the invasion, which is defined as reducing Ukraine's ability to fight by a lot. But when Russia pulled out, it was clear that it had changed its plans. Andrei Kortunov, who was in charge of the Russian International Affairs Council, said, "Putin needs a win. At least he needs to have something he can show his voters back home as a win." Officials in Russia are now focused on taking over the two big eastern regions and making a land passageway along the south coast, from Crimea east to the border with Russia. They have said that they are in charge of the southern part of Kherson, and a top Russian general has said that they hope to take over more land along the Black Sea coast, all the way to Odessa and beyond. Controlling the south of Ukraine is another way to get to Transnistria, said Major General Rustam Minikeyev, referring to a breakaway part of Moldova where Russia has about 1,500 troops. If Russia does take both eastern regions, it will probably try to invade and occupy them after a fake vote, as it did with Crimea in 2014. Ukraine also says that the occupying forces in Kherson are planning a vote on making a separatist state, since they are already using Russia's currency, the ruble, as of May 1. Tatiana Stanovaya, who works for the analysis firm R-Politik and the Carnegie Moscow Center, says that the Kremlin has to take control of Donbass and the land corridor at the very least. They will not stop. I always hear the same thing. We can't help but escalate. Nikolai Patrushev, who is in charge of Russia's powerful Security Council, has said that Ukraine could break up into several states. He blames Ukrainian and Western hatred of Russia for this. The question is whether or not there are enough Russian forces to move forward. By not calling this a war, the Kremlin can't get the country ready for it, and military analyst Michael Kaufman thinks that if that doesn't happen, Russia's offensive in Donbass is the last thing it can try. How does Putin look at Ukraine? Since Ukraine became independent in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell apart, it has slowly turned toward the EU and NATO in the West. The leader of Russia has tried to change this because he sees the fall of the Soviet Union as the breakup of historical Russia. He has said that Russians and Ukrainians are the same people. He has also said that Ukraine doesn't have a long history and that the country's independence is just an anti-Russia project. He said, Ukraine has never had stable traditions of real statehood. In 2013, he put pressure on Viktor Yanukovych, the pro-Russian leader of Ukraine, not to sign a deal with the European Union. This led to protests that led to Yanukovych's ouster in February 2014. Then, Russia took over the southern part of Ukraine called Crimea. This led to a separatist rebellion in the east and a war that killed 14,000 people. As he got ready to invade in February, he tore up an unfulfilled peace deal from 2015 called the Minsk Agreement and said that NATO was threatening our historic future as a nation. He said this without any proof that the NATO countries wanted to start a war in Crimea. He has recently said that Ukraine is being used by NATO to fight a proxy war on Russia. What is Putin's problem with NATO? For Russia's leader, the 30 countries that make up the West's defensive military alliance have one goal: to tear Russia's society apart and destroy it in the end. In a Victory Day speech on May 9, he said that NATO was building up its military in areas close to Russia. Before the war, he asked that NATO turn the clock back to 1997 and stop expanding to the east. He also asked that NATO remove its forces and military facilities from member states that joined the alliance after 1997 and not put strike weapons near Russia's borders. That means the Baltics, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe. What does Russia's future hold after the war against Ukraine? Russia has tried to put an end to criticism. Protests of any kind are prohibited, and over 15,000 individuals have been arrested. President Putin said, "The Russian people will always be able to tell the difference between true patriots and scum and traitors." IT workers and other professionals have left in large numbers, and the political opposition has either left the country or been jailed, like opposition leader Alexei Navalny. A wide range of Western sanctions could cause Russia's economy to shrink by up to 10% and inflation to rise by more than 20% this year. The assets of Russia's central bank have been frozen, and the country's biggest banks can't use the international SWIFT payment transfer network. The US has stopped buying Russian oil and gas. The EU wants to cut gas imports by 2/3 within a year, and the UK wants to stop buying Russian oil by the end of 2022. Russian airlines are not allowed to fly over the EU, the UK, the US, and Canada. President Putin and his group have been hit with personal sanctions. Considering the war conflict, did Russia gain more than its loss? Is there anything more the worst effect of war on the world economy since inflation hits its 40-year high? And that brings us to the end of this video. Feel free to let us know what you think about this video. And if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for all things. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.